Geoff, thank you so much for being here with us today for the InvestNest webinar.
Oh, thank you, James. Right, just the usual disclaimer and forward-looking statements. We do have a prospectus available on our website. It's open to all investors, not just sophisticated. And usual disclaimers, if I talk about potential production or resources, we don't have resources at the moment, so need to bear that in mind in relation to this disclaimer page. An overview: our company was formed in mid-2021 to acquire this project. I first visited the project in 2017, and so we've been following the project, and the opportunity came up to purchase it last year. We made an offer to Keras Mineral Resources, about £500,000. Most of that's paid for. We've got one payment of £200,000, and we will own the project 100%. And I think talking about ESG today being one of the topics, and sustainability, myself and the chairman, we'd looked all around the world really, but particularly in Europe for cobalt projects. That was the driver. Of course, this project has a lot of nickel and copper as well, which are important battery metals. But many of the areas that have had historic mining in Europe, they're in places that are quite built up. So you might have them in places, say, similar to the Yarra Valley in Victoria, or say Bowral in New South Wales, and particularly in places like Germany and other parts of Europe. Other countries have got permitting issues, can take you 3 or 4 years to get your permits. We found in Cyprus 3 or 4 months, but also places like Finland, you can have cobalt deposits right on a major river course. You can have metallurgical issues, you can have 20% arsenic. So when we came across Cyprus, we liked it for a number of reasons, but the environment, the country itself, we quite liked. So we have 3 major projects. We've got over 40 kilometres of strike length, and we're 45 minutes drive from a major export shipping terminal at Limassol. Cyprus has got a big copper mining history back to the Roman times, so I'll touch on that. We've got up to 1.5 kilometres of old sampling in the adits, and that was put in by Hellenic Mining in the 50s, and essentially no real work done in the last 60 years, except some drilling that was done in 2013-14, which got some pretty good results. So we're planning to do some diamond drilling as soon as we list in November. We have a diamond rig on site, and we'll hopefully have first assays out within 6 to 8 weeks of starting to drill. We're raising 4.5 to 6 million. Raising's going quite well. We're talking to particular cornerstone people, including institutions, corporates, and other investors. So you can see our tenements on the right-hand side there. We've got a total of 8 tenements at the moment, including 2 applications. A summary of the structure: tight capital structure, not dissimilar to the last company that presented. We'll have about 50 million shares on issue at 20 cents, 10 mil market cap. There's a couple of million options out there, quite tightly held. We actually responded to investor feedback. We reduced the amount of capital held by directors by 6 million shares, and that cancellation's gone through. So I think the capital structure is about right for this market. Background: myself, James did introduce me. I'm a geologist. I worked in finance for about 7 years, and I've been consulting to companies around the world. Rob Thompson, the mining engineer, we first met over 10 years ago. We worked together in Africa, been involved in projects in Indonesia. Rob built for Oxiana their Sepon and Chartree mines. And Rob and myself were involved early in the year with an IPO called Southern Palladium that Rob put the board together. I did some early work on it, and that was a 50-cent IPO, traded as high as $1.40, I think, and it's now around about $1. So that's been quite successful. We'll be hoping for the same success with this company. Ben Jarvis is a fairly well-known resource director and investor, and runs 6 Degrees Investor Relations. We've also got a lot of geologists. We've got local geologists, and we do use some expat geologists in Cyprus. The market in Europe, I think that's a very important thematic here. The demand for electric vehicles is growing. Europe's one of the fastest growing markets. They're planning to ban internal combustion engines. by 2030 and 2035 in different countries. There's over 20 major battery factories, called these so-called gigafactories, under construction. And it recently, Benchmark Minerals came out and said we need another 60 or 70 new mines for nickel and cobalt. So I think the demand's certainly there, even though, as the last presenter touched on, they're trying to reduce the amount of cobalt. It's gone from 20 kilos in the Tesla batteries, I think now down to 10, and a lot of batteries won't use cobalt. But when you have 70% of cobalt coming out of the DRC, Russia's the second biggest producer at 9%, so that's 80% of cobalt supply from countries that make people a bit nervous. I think there'll be certainly demand for cobalt going forward, although as I'll demonstrate, it's not the only mineral that we'll be reliant on this project. Map here showing where Cyprus is. You can see all the battery factories, not all of them, but a lot of them there that are going in. They're all different types. You've got vanadium redox, you've got zinc batteries. There's all sorts of different chemistries, but at the end of the day, they're going to need a lot of metals. Cyprus itself was a major copper producer, over 70 million tonnes exploited until the 1970s. And really what happened when the Turkish occupation in the north, a lot of business owners left, the mine shut down, but it's been politically stable for the last sort of 60 years. It joined the EU, the Republic of Cyprus in the south in 2006, and so it's benefited really from a lot of stimulus money's gone in. You've got 4-lane freeways, wind farms, and excellent infrastructure. And I think that will be very helpful if we get to the stage of building a mine here. European Battery Alliance, we'll look to join that at some point. I think if we get to the stage of proving up a resource and a project, we'll have a lot of interest from manufacturers and other people wanting to do offtake deals on the metals that we can produce. So 3 projects in summary. We have the Laxia project, which is the main project we bought. We think we can get a resource there within 12 months, and a lot of very good grades. The ore body outcrops for over 1 kilometre. Some drilling that was done almost 10 years ago, showing some pretty good intercepts here. We've got good grades of gold, copper and cobalt. The nickel's about 0.2%, and we're hoping that nickel grade will improve with depth. That's a geological theory that I'll touch on a little bit later. PEVCOS is a second project about 2 k's to the south. It's high grades of nickel. You've got a drill intercept there, 2 metres at 3% nickel plus 3 grams of gold. And it's right next to a major quarry. So Cyprus has seen this big expansion of the quarrying industry from 2.5 million tonnes 5 years ago to about 8-9 million tonnes. All that aggregate's going into this, a lot of the construction boom underway on the coast. And so people say that they have a big mining industry. There has been a copper gold mine operating in the north, but there's been a lot of quarries being built. And certainly what we're looking at, the scale and the design of any mine will not be of the same sort of scale as these quarries. So from an environmental point of view, much lower impact. We'll be looking at underground mining most likely. So Laxia is our main target. The ore body itself, shown in red here, outcrops for up to 1 kilometre. It's open to the north and south, peg ground to the north. There's been a lot of sampling done on it over the years, and a little bit of drilling. You can see some of the grades. Of course, gold often enriches at surface and copper leaches out, and nickel and cobalt as well. So you can see some of the gold grades here. There's quite a few areas that are accessible in terms of the adits. There's some very good sampling, as I said, and you've got a road pretty much to site. There's a small upgrade to an old road from the 50s we'll make here to get into the drilling, but the land is essentially state forest. They're happy for us to go in and upgrade the roads. It helps them with their firefighting, but it's very sparse forest. The topography is quite steep, and we're a couple of kilometres from the nearest village, so it's a very good location. PEVCOS project, showing cross section here with that intercept with the 3% nickel. Some of the historical adit grades here, you've got up to 11% nickel, 3 or 4% copper and 3% cobalt. So some very good grades in the adits. A lot of those adits are closed in now on the edge of the quarry, but we'll probably look to do drilling there. And that's our second priority project. Our third one at Apsia we discovered in our reconnaissance license. We're reclassifying that at the moment so we can drill that next year. And there's an old drill hole shown here, 25 metre zone there of chalcopyrite. Unfortunately, we don't have the assays, but you can see in the top right there, I'm standing next to an outcrop, quite copper rich. A lot of copper mining there historically, even potentially in Roman times, they were mining copper there 2,000 years ago. So it's got a long history. There's a lot of targets, and as I've mentioned, it's not just copper we're looking for. So use of funds, we raised 4.5. We can do over 6,000 metres of diamond drilling. We can double that, we raised 6. And the drill rig, as I mentioned, ready to go in November in country. Keep the money in the ground. I'll be the only full-time employee, everyone else is contractors. And we share an office in Cyprus. We keep the overheads very low. And most of those costs for the IPO have been paid for, and just that vendor payment to own the project 100%. So a summary here, and I will just after this go into a couple of slides in the appendix, but we've got a rare mix of metals, potential for multiple revenue streams should we prove up a mine, 100% owned projects, relatively low EV, 5.6 million, and it's brownfields drilling. So we know where we're drilling. We think there's a very good likelihood we will hit the ore body and be able to show some good results. Shallow diamond holes at first. Next year we'll step back and do 300 metre holes at Laxia, and hopefully by the end of next year we can have a resource. We may have a exploration target out before then. Favourable jurisdiction, 12% corporate tax, and we very much like the attitude of the government. They're in favour of redeveloping the mining industry, and being in the EU we can benefit from all the expertise in the EU, a lot of the potential funding that may be available, and we're very close to these growing markets. Infrastructure-wise, Cyprus is quite amazing. These 4-lane freeways, you've got a whole population on the island of not much more than 1 million people, so it's a good place to drive, but also there's a lot of infrastructure like sealed roads to pretty much to site. So timeline, we're raising now, we're hoping to close the end of the month, we'll be listing November, drilling essentially within a few weeks of listing, we hope, and we can drill all year round in Cyprus. There's a wet season, but we don't think that'll delay us too much because the roads are pretty good. We'd like to fly some airborne geophysics next year and get back into the mapping and identify some new prospects. I will just touch quickly on a couple of appendix slides. We've got 40 kilometres of strike length, which is this blue line here between the ultramafics and the intrusive rocks, and that gives rise to this serpentinisation, which is often a focus for the mineralisation. And without getting too technical, there's a lot of different rock types. You can see about 30 or 40 different rock types. Typical ultramafic nickel geology. If any of you listeners are nickel geologists or have friends who are nickel geologists, they'll know a lot of these terminologies here, and pillow lavas and sheeted dikes, pyroxenites. It's a very good setting for a nickel deposit, amongst other things we're looking at. So interestingly here, I was in Cyprus 2017, a geologist by the name of Ian Pringle was also there as a consultant when we were looking at this project initially, and he just got off the plane from Bouazir in Morocco. They've been mining there for 90 years. It's one of the highest grade cobalt mines in the world at over 1% cobalt, 2 to 3% nickel plus gold. They're mining now at about 900 metres deep, and it's not a big mine. They do about 250 to 350,000 tonne a year. They just did an offtake agreement with Renault for 5,000 tonnes a year of cobalt sulfate, and all the similarities are there. The age of the rocks, the mineralisation style. When we look at the core we're seeing in Cyprus, very similar to what you get here in Morocco in the central photo. Morocco at the top there with the decline, they're not mining the diorites, versus our Pevkos project in the south where they're mining the diorites. So there is a theory that Morocco and Cyprus were joined potentially, and they were separated along this big transform fault, intraplate fault. That's just a theory, but we're certainly very encouraged by this geology, and if it hangs together, this theory, then as we drill deeper into this system, we should see the cobalt and nickel grades improve. The modelling we've done on the ore body shows it does hang together based on the past drilling. You see on the right here, most of that's pretty shallow, 30, 40 metres down. Some intersections 150 metres down, but certainly a lot of potential to extend at depth. The copper grades are pretty good, and the gold and cobalt, of course, up to sort of 0.4%. Cobalt over 50,000 a tonne. Some of those values are quite high in terms of metals. So there's a 8-metre wide zone in this adit here. We've been in and sampled. We're going to put the rig in there first. It outcrops at surface here. We just did a 50 kilo sampling program. We've got some pretty good grades at surface, bearing in mind that cobalt and nickel and copper to a lesser extent often leach at surface. So we don't necessarily think those grades are representative, but they're very encouraging, particularly when you see this sort of 3 to 4 grams gold in the ore, which will be an important component in terms of value. And again, just another shot of West Laxia here, where we're going to drill about 12 to 15 holes along this western limb, and we should have first assays out in January. I'll put this slide in. It's just showing some examples of high-grade VMS type deposits. This is an ultramafic VMS, so a bit different. We don't have the zinc and lead some of these other deposits have, but you know, the values can be there. Hera, that are really a mine, they made 80 million 1 year out of that ore body. Some of you will remember back in the day, Jabiru deposit, Jabiru Metals, sorry, with the Jaguar deposit was taken over by Independence Group for about 550 million. That deposit was only 1.8 million tonnes. It started 300 metres down. So we have ore bodies here from surface. If we can get to a development, then that will be a much better position economically, because we don't have to spend a year developing down to the ore body. We can develop from surface. So there's a lot of encouraging things about this, relatively early stage, but like I said, hopefully have some high-grade results out in the new year. So thank you for the opportunity to present the story.
Well, Geoff, thank you very much for sharing the presentation.